All right, so let's talk for a minute about domestic politics and kind of the domestic politics of this. Let us suppose we think that there are people in this room who believe that spending $100 billion a year on a military presence in a country whose GDP is about $14 billion a year to chase after about 50 Al-Qaeda operatives doesn't make sense. How would they go about changing what we are doing from a political perspective? Congressman, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Darcy. And first of all, thank you all for being here. I think it's extraordinarily important, and probably most important, for the progressive community in this country to, first of all, become engaged in this issue. That's step one. We have to engage and challenge the Congress, and the Congress has to engage and challenge the administration if we are going to move this thing forward. The fact of the matter is that this debate and this issue in Washington has been dominated by the military-industrial complex, by the Republicans, by the military. It's extraordinary to watch the degree to which the military has manipulated the media and the administration to box them into positions, not only to continually come up with the largest defense budgets in the history of the United States, but also to come up with this escalation strategy. The first military escalation, of course, happened before the president's process of reassessing Afghanistan even began. That's how powerful these forces are. Now the problem, let's be very frank about this. When you talk to Democrats in Congress, progressives in many organizations around the country, they have said up to this point, well, no, well, look, he's our guy. You know, and it's kind of, it's one thing to go after George W. Bush, of course, but it's another thing to go after our guy. And then secondly, you know, we've got so many other issues. There are so many other priorities that are so important and so engaging all of us that we really have to focus on this. And they'll say, well, you know, we really don't want to spend our time being divided against each other, particularly when we have such an important political challenge in front of us. I mean, the fact of the matter is that it's because he's our guy, because he's a president that we want to see succeed, it is so critical for us to work to get this albatross off the neck of this administration, off the neck of this country, if this administration and this country is going to succeed. Secondly, if you look at any issue that we care about, including Social Security, none of these issues are going to have a chance to succeed as long as we keep running up the credit card on adventures like Afghanistan. At $100 billion per year, Darcy, does not include the interest payments on this. And if you look at the New York Times, funny, the New York Times today, interesting story on this process, this pressure, political pressure. Again, the pressure from the right calling for deficit reduction, and the president responding with his commission on deficit reduction. And of course, the guy who would like nothing more than to be Speaker of the House is saying that in order to make sure there's enough money for war, we have to start looking at our country's entitlement system. Read Social Security, read Medicare, read Medicaid. And virtually any program that you have, that the New York Times story says today that in fact, our own chairman, that is the Democratic Party's chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, said that as far as deficits are concerned, he would look first at tax increases and changes in Social Security and Medicare, this Democratic, to lower the deficit, and there was no way that Congress would make major cuts in military budgets as long as there are 100,000 troops at war. So in other words, the way to save the very investments and values and principles that we as progressives care so much about is through Afghanistan. And by challenging the Congress to challenge this administration and create a political climate in Washington that is not so dominated by the right wing, by the military, and by the military-industrial complex, we have got to get busy.
So I do have another question I'm hoping one of you would be willing to answer, which is one that I get asked a lot by women I talk to about Afghanistan. What happens to the women and girls of Afghanistan if we leave, and what happens if we stay?
Being there in eastern southern Afghanistan, I can tell you that the treatment of women, as we see, is harsh And the Taliban in the 90s took it to a whole perverse extreme level. But just because the Taliban are no longer in power does not mean that women aren't kept as chattel, that women aren't kept inside their homes, can't leave without being covered. It's a cultural issue there. And my view is, one, as long as conflict is going on, everybody's bad off. But you're not going to change another nation's culture through the barrel of a rifle. If anything, what you're going to do is you're going to see that culture retract from you and resent you and rebel against you because you're trying to change it. And as horrible as some of the things I saw there, and I was in a city in the south, 30,000 people. We had, between American, Romanian, and Afghan forces, about 4,000 troops in that city. So this should have been, i.e., a liberated city. No, it was like the 14th century then, in terms of how women were treated. So you're not going to change it through the barrel of a rifle. There's bigger issues in terms of there's a war going on and people are being killed on both sides, many of them innocent. And the fact comes down to it, that begs the question then, if you're advocating that we need to engage in combat operations in eastern and southern Afghanistan, in order to change someone's culture, you're saying that the United States should go to war to change someone else's culture. And I don't think that's something that anyone wants to accept. It's a terrible situation there. I will say the one thing you do see is as bad off as everything was in Kalat or in southern Afghanistan, or in eastern Afghanistan, Jalalabad, which is one of the more progressive cities in the Pashtun Belt, or the most progressive city in the Pashtun Belt, or most urban. Yeah, women they're still treated like it's the 14th century, but everybody's got 2 cell phones on them. So the way you change it is over time, generationally, through information.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something that is, it's a difficult issue. I mean, as progressives, this is a very important issue, women's rights, human rights, more broadly. I think we can, I think back to the arguments over Afghanistan at the beginning, and how the right wing kind of picked up this issue, and it's always amazing to me how the right wing always seems to discover human rights and women's rights whenever they want to start a new war. But, this gets to, as Matt said, I think even if we do start to draw down troops, we're not going to end our engagement. And I think this gets to the very important question that progressives have to think about on foreign policy, and that's demilitarizing our relationship to the world, and specifically our relationship to Afghanistan. If we want to make the life of women better in Afghanistan, how do we do that? Not with guns, but with greater engagement and greater back and forth. It's not going to happen through violence.
So let's suppose, hypothetically, a group of respected experts were to put together an alternative course for Afghanistan that did not involve us having the kind of military presence we have there, that held the president to his commitment to start drawing down forces next summer. Congressman Andrews, what kinds of activities, what kind of engagement would Congress need to have, and what can activists like the ones here do to impact that debate and the course of that course of action?
Well, first of all, we have to engage in this coming electoral arena. We have to make this an issue that candidates and incumbents are going to have to address. First of all, there's some good news. Number one, the Congress did pass. That is, they defeated, but the Democratic caucus passed, or at least embraced, the majority of the caucus, a requirement, an amendment proposed by Jim McGovern, the Democrat from Massachusetts, in the appropriations bill in Afghanistan. The administration established an exit strategy to close the open-ended military commitment to the Karzai government. And it received 162 votes, a strong majority of the Democratic caucus, including all the leadership. And that was a direct result of people like the people in this room engaging members of Congress and telling them about the importance of this vote and the importance to take a strong stand. So that was an important step forward. Secondly, we have the majority of Americans with us. Polls are consistently showing now that a majority of Americans believe that this $100 billion plus a year that many are concluding is in fact undermining our national security in so many ways, is simply not worth it, and are opposed to this kind of continued investment. Thirdly, the news reporting out of Afghanistan to the public has gone from being breathlessly optimistic with this new strategy and this new change and how great things were going to be in margin, to a very sober and realistic and frightening in many respects depiction of the facts on the ground. And they're not just taking the Pentagon's word for it at face value, they're actually doing some fact-checking. And some of these reports are entering the news media. So all of these are critically important for the public debate now, between now and the election. Now, in December, we're going to have an important moment. There's going to be a kind of a perfect storm of events that are going to start developing. First of all, we'll have the new Congress, whatever that looks like. So that's going to be a challenge, we know, under any circumstances. But secondly, we're going to have the President's Commission on Deficit Reduction issue its report on what recommendations it has. And we should all be very, very, very concerned about the cuts that are going to be required if we don't start reining in this runaway train, freight train of defense spending. And we've got to get ready for that. And then thirdly, the administration is going to issue its assessment of its strategy for Afghanistan up to that point, up to December. So we're going to have an opportunity, the stage will be set, if you will, for engagement for the next Congress. And we have to be fully prepared to be engaged with that commission and its results, with that assessment and what its recommendations are, and then aggressively move forward to the new Congress to challenge the bankruptcy of America in a policy that has nothing to do with our national security.